The Zylofon Job Seeking Series. Today, we'll be talking about some tips on preparing for a job interview. I know many of you are done with your national service and you want some tips on how to get a job out there. And so it is a part of our responsibility, our social responsibility, to educate you, to give you some free education. This morning, we'll be hosting a human resource expert who have been recruiting for about 15 years now. Has a very wide experience in so many sectors. You can talk about telecommunication, media, banking, and so on and so forth. He's recruited across all of these sectors. This morning, we'll be having him in the studio talk to us about some of the things you should do or some of the tips in preparing for a job interview.
I started way back around 2007. And since then, I have worked in different HR capacities, but has always been directly involved in recruitment. As I indicated earlier, I have worked across the consulting industry, the banking, the telecommunications, and the media. And in all these sectors, I have been very much involved in recruitment. And in total, I probably have filled a little in excess of 1,000 vacancies.
Oh, I see. You have recruited over 1,000 people,
yes,
in your 15 years of
experience. Because in some industries that you find yourself in where turnover ratio is quite high, and you typically have people leaving, and on a monthly basis you are recruiting between 50 to 100 people. And so in total I have done that. I have worked in my consulting capacity. I've actually supported many organizations who are into manufacturing, oil and gas, banking, across various sectors. And so I do feel comfortable in terms of what I'm talking about. Professionally, I'm a chartered HR practitioner with the Chartered Institute of Human Resource Management Practitioner, that is in the UK. I also have a master's in HR. Recruitment is something that is very dear to me. Beyond the fact that you are solving an organizational problem, you are also actually helping people to learn and also to land their dream jobs.
And also to make a living.
To make a living, absolutely. At the end of the day, that is what it comes down to. And that's what very often puts pressure on people when they are actually preparing for interviews, because someone sees it as my living depends on this job. And that straight away will put
my next car, my dream car, my food, my home, and all of that depends on this job.
Absolutely. My kids, the kind of schools they will go to, how I'm going to be able to raise them, everything depends on the job for most people that are not entrepreneurs and they are likely to work in various industries. So landing the right job is actually a big deal, and rightly so. People feel very nervous when they are attending interviews because they feel like there is a lot at stake. The survival of my family, several other people are involved, and so I cannot afford to fail them. So I've been doing this, and I've also had the opportunity to speak on various forums, and I have been very much involved in youth recruitment also within my experiences. I have visited various universities, across the country, basically engaging people. At this particular point in my career, I was a regular face in many career fairs across most of the mainstream universities that you have within the country, both around Accra and in Kumasi. And so when it comes to youth recruitment and basically how to support people to build their careers, land the right jobs, and put themselves on the right path to career progression, I have been very much involved in that.
Now let's talk about interviewing. Yesterday we spoke about tips you should get when you are preparing your CV. So now the assumption is that from all of the discussions yesterday, the assumption is that the CVs have been sorted. Your CV has made it through the first door, and now you are preparing for the interview. As a recruiter, why do you even do the interview in the first place?
Thank you for that. Now, basically, recruitment is a huge risk to every organization. The fact that you are going to employ someone is a huge risk, because failure to get the right person can cost the organization a whole lot. Now, beyond the fact that a person is coming to perform a role, the entire time that you spend advertising for a vacancy, putting together a panel to actually spend a lot of time going through CVs and assessing candidates, interviewing them, they having to spend a period of time giving the organizations they work for notice period, and then ultimately join you. It's a whole lot of time and money involved in terms of recruitment. So you can't just afford to get it wrong at all. And that is the reason why you have various levels of assessments to ensure that you reduce the risk of recruitment to the barest minimum. So, and for most candidates, I usually tell them that the fact that you have been invited for an interview, you should give yourself an initial congratulatory message, because actually making it to the interview stage proves that you are capable enough to do the job.
And it is possible that you can get a job.
Absolutely. The fact that you've been invited for the interview means that the company actually believes you have what it takes to perform that particular responsibility. And so you are almost 50% there. It is yours to lose. That is how you should see it. The moment you get invited into an interview, you should tell yourself, this job is mine to lose. Because you have demonstrated in your CV that you have the competence, you have what it takes to deliver on the role. But that is not enough. You cannot just write something I read and make a conclusive decision based on that, considering the level of risk involved and the cost of failure. So you must assure yourself that you are picking the right person, because at the end of the day, the fortunes of your organization may actually depend on that particular individual. So it is a critical thing that, unfortunately, I've seen some organizations treat it with some level of callousness. People take it like it's a very simple exercise. Recruitment is a serious business, because the moment you get it wrong, it is likely to affect your organization, significantly.
So the interview process is actually to determine whether what you said in your CV is actually demonstrable. You can actually demonstrate what it is you said in your CV.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, there are people who are unable to communicate. I mean, they have a lot of, problems communicating, and they come under a lot of tension, and so on and so forth. Now, I am wondering, maybe I could be able to write well. I could be able to work well. I have demonstrated that in I've demonstrated my competencies in my CV. I come for the interview and I am unable to articulate. Perhaps because I have some hindrances. Some people have some stage fright, we call it, and because of that, they are unable to demonstrate that. As a recruiter, is there any way you are able to balance that, or is there any way you are able to spot that? Oh, indeed, this person has a talent beyond the communication, but except that they are unable to articulate it, and that we should give them the opportunity.
Thank you. Now, every experienced recruiter is able to tell when people are tense, is able to actually see beyond the rough edges of a candidate. However, what I advise candidates is that it's not every time that you will come across highly experienced recruiters. And so you must ensure that you actually complete your part of the bargain to the best of your ability. And everything comes down to preparation. Now, don't forget, beyond the fact that you are going to demonstrate that what you have on your CV that actually earned you the invitation to the interview, you can actually do that. You are in 99.9% of the times actually competing with other people.
Okay.
And so if there are others who can do it and can communicate it, then you must also be prepared to step up to the table. Now, having said that, we are all human beings, and there are times that you can actually identify this is a great candidate, this person has a lot of potential. Communication is his problem. And there are others that are under the mistaken belief that your ability to communicate effectively and speak all the great English is what is going to earn you the job. At the end of the day, it has to come down to substance.
Right.
Because in most roles, even though communication is a critical aspect of your responsibilities as an employee, at the end of the day, it comes out to actual delivery on the job. Do you have the capability to perform the responsibilities of the role that has actually been defined for you? And so if you are able to do that, then all the best. Now, communication, like many other things, can actually be learned. They can be perfected based on practice. And my experience tells me that, look, most people have difficulties communicating during interviews because of poor preparations. Now, it all comes down to confidence. And research will tell you that, higher levels of preparation always comes along with higher levels of confidence. If you are so sure about what you're talking about, if you are so sure about your competencies, if you are so sure about your abilities to deliver on the job, nothing should stop you from being able to communicate that. Now, being nervous in an interview is a very natural feeling. indeed, for me, that has, sat in over 1,000 interviews over the 15-year period that I'm talking about. I can say that if I find myself in an interview room today, being at the other side, I probably will feel nervous too. And it's just natural, because we are all human beings, because there is always the fear of the unknown. Irrespective of how prepared you are, you will always be nervous. Now, it is okay, it's perfectly okay, and every experienced recruiter will tell you that, look, there is nothing fundamentally wrong with being nervous. However, you must be in a position to be able to manage your nerves to the extent that it will not negatively impact on your performance. If you are so tense and nervous that you struggle to get words out of your mouth, you cannot communicate basic things, you cannot demonstrate your ability to perform the job, then that certainly will work against you, because there are others that are going to prepare, there are others that will practice over and over. They make sure that they are dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and once they get into the interview room, they deliver. The interview room is not a place to go and be talking about the fact that you are a quick learner. And I always tell people, do your homework well, ensure that you understand the responsibilities of the role, ensure that you understand the capabilities required to deliver on the job, and prepare yourself along those lines. Once you get into the interview, you will be able to demonstrate that you are the right candidate. Imagine others are demonstrating how they can deliver on the job, and you are telling me that you are a very fast learner, and given the opportunity, you will learn quickly. Every recruiter, every organization wants fast learners, because no matter how experienced you are, there will always be the opportunity to learn. But that your ability to be a fast learner cannot be proven immediately within the interview room. So the person that comes closer to demonstrating the capabilities gets the job.
I see.
At the end of the day, beyond the fact that you are looking at a competent people, you are also looking at the most competent among the competent ones.
Now, Elom said that when he went for a job interview, his Facebook account was actually looked up.
Yeah.
And, it means then that recruiters actually go behind us asking for questions, trying to investigate about us and so on and so forth. Is that something you've been doing as a recruiter? Why would you do that if you do?
Absolutely. For certain roles, for certain levels of role, you typically will do that. Every experienced recruiter will do that. Once again, I go back to the point that recruitment is a huge risk to the organization. And the best of recruiters will make sure that they are actually identifying all the risks associated with a candidate and dealing with them. In fact, there are times that you go ahead to even check the person's credit score, sometimes with their knowledge or without their knowledge, because depending on the kind of role that they are coming to occupy, that could pose a huge risk. And so you want to ensure that you are actually recruiting the right person within your organization. And you see, very often people forget that it is an assessment process. It's not just an interview. People assume once you have been shortlisted, it's an interview. And indeed, when you get invited for an assessment, you need to ask, what will be the nature of the assessment? You might get there and it's not a question and answer session like we typically get in an interview. You could actually be taken through various methods or various approaches to identifying the right candidate from the job. Young people typically will be invited for an assessment center where they get to do an interview, they do a group work, they do presentations, they are given a case study problem that they solve, and a variety of other things. So the moment you get invited, either by telephone or by email, you need to clearly understand, if it has not been stated what will be the mode of assessment, you need to get that. And so you are assessing the candidate in totality. You are not just going to make the decision based on that singular interaction that you have. Because in recruitment, it is said that the higher the number of methods that you use, the likelihood of getting the right candidate. If you rely on just one method of recruitment, then you are exposing yourself to a much bigger risk.
Now, if you just joined us, you're listening to The Statecraft. This is the Tuesday's edition of The Statecraft here on Zylofon 102.1 FM and of course on Zylofon TV. We're also live on our Facebook platform, Zylofon FM 102.1 on Facebook. You can search us and follow us on any of these platforms. And at any point in time, if you want to ask a question to our resource person, you can send us a text on our WhatsApp line. You can see that on the screen. For those of you who are watching from your homes, you can see our WhatsApp line on your screen. But if you're not, then the WhatsApp line is 0266 660-735. 0266-660-735. This morning, I have in the studio with me an HR expert who has about 15 years of recruiting experience under his belt. His recruitment is also not limited to one industry, which makes it nicer for us because he comes on board with multiple, industry experience. He's recruited across telecommunication, across consultancy, banking, and of course across media as well. And so, this is someone who's been determining people's fates in a job interview. And so I think that he's just the right person, the right candidate, let me say, to be speaking to us this morning on the issue of recruitment. Now, people go into job interviews preparing on their looks. How to look like. How to dress and look like. As a recruiter, what percentage of the success is dependent on how I look when I appear before your interview? In other words, how important is how I look as someone who's seeking for a job when I come for a job interview?
Thanks for that question. It's an interesting one. I will not put a specific percentage to that, but there's a very important point that I want to make. Now, recruitment, to a large extent, is a logical exercise. There are no emotions about it. It is a completely logical exercise. These are the specific job requirements. This is the profile of the candidate, and the entire process basically is trying to match the requirements of the job to the profile of the candidate that you are dealing with. And so straight away you can say that it's a very logical exercise. However, this is being done by human beings, and so sometimes you will find out that there are certain inarticulate factors that are actually contributing significantly to the decision making. And I always go back to the point that it has to do with the kind of panel that you're doing. You don't leave anything to chance. When you meet a very experienced recruiter, people that are very much trained within the organization to identify the right people, sometimes, or in most instances, they will overlook the trivialities. However, appearance is a critical, part of the entire process of assessment.
Right.
You, the candidate, once successful, you will be representing the organization. You will become the image of that particular organization. And it's important that you understand the ethics, the dress code, and the appearance structure of that particular organization that you are interviewing for. You don't just walk in, looking like you are lost. Before you attend an interview, if it is within a bank, you certainly understand the dress culture within a bank. And so you should do it, nothing less than that. Now, there's what we call the 7-11 rule. And it basically says that when you see someone for the first time, within 7 seconds, you actually answer 18 questions about that person.
Oh, really?
In order to form an image. And those listening to me can actually go onto Google and search for the 7-11 rule. You know the foundations of that rule?
No.
It goes back to, hunter-gatherer days, the slave trade days. When you encounter someone, you are unable to tell whether this is an enemy or this is a friend.
I see.
And so you have 7 seconds to make that decision. Beyond 7 seconds, you probably will be captured and you are in the next trail, ready to be shipped outside the country. So, and it's the same thing for human nature.
And it's psychological.
It's psychological. The moment you see someone for the first time, within 7 seconds, you have already made an opinion about that person. And let's not forget, first impressions are very critical. If you walk into an interview room, sharply dressed, and someone does his own analysis and concludes that you are not a serious person, now you are starting from negative. Because at the end of the day, you now have to prove beyond every reasonable doubt that you are not what you look. However, if you also go into an interview properly dressed and looking quite impressive, you are probably a step higher. You are now coming to prove that you are not worth the dressing. And so it's important that you carry that particular image. And once you start on a very good note by appearing properly and creating the right impression in the minds of your assessors that you have what it takes to deliver on the role, subsequently, every other thing is likely to be smooth sailing. Don't go into an interview and let the conversation after you have exited be about your dressing or how your hair is unkempt or how your shoe has not been polished. Because these are human beings. They are going to make their own impressions about you. Let it be a positive one. and your dressing should be able to speak to that.
I see.
Let them understand that you know what the role involves. And you see, it's not every role that you can just walk into dressing anyhow. Every single role comes with its own dress code. And the entire process of proving that you are capable of doing the job equally includes the way you appear.
I see. Interesting conversation so far, Bashiru. Let me go into the next question that talks about the factors, the most important factors you look out for as an interviewer or as a recruiter. When I appear before you for a job interview, what are the factors or what are some of the things you look out for?
Okay, thanks so much. Depending on the level of role that you're actually recruiting for, certain things may be more important than the other. And I'm sure that this morning, majority of our audience are young people, so I will deal with the young people, then I'll deal with the experienced ones. Now, for young people, most of what businesses are actually looking for is the right attitude and the right potential. Now, young people out there typically comes with very limited years of experience. But what will convince an employer basically is your demonstration of the potential to grow into a bigger role within the organization.
Okay.
And here we are basically looking at your demeanor, your attitude. What is your work ethic? Are you someone that shows initiative? And these are things that you don't necessarily need to acquire experiences in order to get them. It's your attitude. Because if you see someone that has the initiative, someone that is prepared to learn, someone who is a quick learner, someone who is prepared to work, beyond extra hours, someone who is actually prepared to step outside the box and think. Those are the things that you're typically looking at from a young candidate. And so when you are preparing for an interview, for any role that typically will require less than 2 or 3 years of experience, then you are looking at soft skills basically. How are you able to communicate? Can you write properly? Because you see, communication is so fundamental. No one is an island. Everybody will work in an organization with other people.
So there are social interactions.
Absolutely, that is a given. Your interpersonal skills must be up there, and typically you'll be asked basic questions. Tell me about a time when you have had to lead a group of other colleagues to deliver on an assignment. I am basically trying to test your leadership skills. I'm able to tell your organizational skills, how you can bring other people together and deliver. And at the end of the day, these are some of the traits that you require to succeed in an organization as a leader. If you cannot galvanize people together, if you cannot set the agenda, if you cannot lead people to achieve a basic objective, then you are out there. And it doesn't have to be a work experience. If you can tell me during school, it could be a project work. Even at a family end of year party, you were tasked to be responsible for the kebab that was going to be provided there. These are all experiences that could be useful. And for young people, you don't walk into the interview room with a lot of experiences, but you should not let your assessors down by your lack of knowledge about the role, by your lack of knowledge about the organization you intend to work for, and how you see yourself within the organization. It's very important that you answer these 3 basic questions before you walk into the interview. What is it about the organization that I need to understand? And what is it about the organization that appeals to me? Then you look at yourself. What am I offering? What are some of the potential skills that I have that I think this is the right organization for me and will actually help me to nurse those skills and become a very experienced person? And then you're also looking at your organizational skills, ability to interact with people, your willingness to learn, And in this day and age, obviously your IT skills must be up there. And I keep saying, these are some of the basic things that you need to get right before you go into an interview and start telling people, oh, I am a very fast learner. You're a very fast learner. As you sit at home currently that you don't have a job, you can learn it, a skill. Get online.
So the soft skills.
Absolutely.
Photography, IT, editing, and all of those soft skills.
All of those.
You advise young people to have them.
You need to have them. Those are basic, and you don't need to work somewhere to get some of these skills. And that is why we call them skills. They are not necessarily capabilities, or they are not necessarily experiences that you have demonstrated.
Or they are not. Places. They may not necessarily be academic qualifications.
Not at all. Not at all. It is just your ability to do something. And academic qualifications are very important. But at the end of the day, you are going to deliver on the job. So that is actually more important. Demonstrating, understanding the requirements of the job, and demonstrating your suitability for those requirements are the most important things for young people. So make sure that you get those basics right.
Folks, if you just joined me, you're welcome to the show. It's not too late. We are having conversations on how to prepare for a job interview, a very important conversation. Most importantly, when we know that our folks are done with their national service, those national service, folks have completed on Friday, many of whom will be going home without jobs. I mean, many of you, the companies you have had your service with are not retaining you. You are going home with a lot of despair, not knowing where the next opportunity will come from. And I'm also sure many of us will be soon embarking on job hunting. We have dedicated this particular week to do what we call the Zylofon Job Seeking Series. Yesterday we spoke about preparing CV, so the tips on how to prepare a convincing CV or a winning CV. And the assumption is that if you are done preparing the CV, the next stage is that you'll be shortlisted for an interview. And so this morning we are speaking to Bashiru Narima, Zylofon Narima. He is an HR expert who has about 15 years of recruitment experience under his belt. And we've been talking about interview, some of the things you should watch out for when you're preparing for your interview. And of course, we've been speaking about some of the factors that will make you get kicked out of the interview. Maybe not necessarily, but of course, you go out there and it looks like you're not going to make it. We're speaking about some of those factors, and I'm sure it will be very important for you to know. You can also send in your comments or your questions if you have any for my very good friend who's sitting in front of me. Please send the messages to our WhatsApp line 0266 660735 0266 660735, and I'll be so glad to share your thoughts with the rest of the people who are doing the listening or the viewing in our homes, in our various offices, and wherever it is. Bash, let's go to some biases. All right. So as a recruiter, I know, like you said earlier, we are humans. We have some biases. Yeah. The bias could be on religious grounds, it could be on ethnic grounds, it could be on maybe gender, and all of these other demographies that could make you as a recruiter form biases. How do I, especially if I come across as someone who falls within any of the biases for the recruiter, how do I as a recruiter first of all identify that? Is there a way I can, as an interviewee, I beg your pardon, is there a way I can identify that? If I can, how do I navigate that particular preconceived thought about who I am, and sometimes something you cannot do anything about?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are several biases out there, and a good number of them actually stem from what we call micro iniquities. And the micro iniquities basically, they are certain traits about people that they really can't do anything about, but because of the way we see those things and we interpret them, we cluster the people into various categories and treat them differently. It's just like you see an Rastafarian comes into an interview, and straight away some people have certain biases towards people that appear in that particular manner, and they start making various conclusions that, okay, this guy is a weed smoker, and based on that assumption they continue to treat the people differently. They may even demonstrate some sort of a hostile attitude towards you. Now these are in most serious organizations, recruiters are taking through various forms of trainings to make sure that the less relevant aspects of the job are not the ones that are influencing the decision making. Okay. At the end of the day, as I indicated, a candidate is seen as someone that has the potential to come and solve a problem within the organization. When someone is recruiting, when an organization is recruiting, they are not doing the candidate a favor. They are not interested in just putting, food on your table because you don't have a job. They actually see you as someone who can add value to that. And so for most experienced recruiters, they will be able to identify some of the micro iniquities and to deal with them, and to let you understand that the fact that somebody walks in with a bushy hair does not mean that he's an unkempt person. Now, for young people and for people generally that are really, really actively searching for jobs, it's important you also identify some of these micro iniquities or some of these biases and see how much you can actually reduce them. Now, if the fact that you kept a bushy hair is what is going to contribute to you losing your job, why don't you just provide a proper appearance? Now, some of them are actually even legal in nature, because it's not for nothing that you see typically a proper organization will not advertise a role and tell you that, oh, they are only looking for females, or they tell you that they are
looking for Christians or Muslims,
or Muslim, because that is actually against the law. There is what we call the protected characteristics, and once you discriminate against someone based on the protected characteristics, then you are likely to be at the wrong side of the law. Unfortunately or fortunately, we live in a country where suing someone who refuses you a job as a result of a form of discrimination is one of the last things people will do, because you are actually looking at making your daily bread. Where are you going to get the money to go and be pursuing any legal action against someone who discriminated against you? And so a lot of it has happened in various sectors, but people hardly talk about them. But in every opportunity that I have had to train line managers on recruitment, those are things that I've been very particular about, because the last thing I want is an organization that I am working for or supporting being seen as one that is discriminating against people. And luckily enough, all the organizations that I have worked for have happened to be equal opportunity employers, where typically they will not look at any other factors but what is really required to do the job, and look at what is within the legal remit. However, you are a candidate, and it's not every organization that has the right people to decipher. And I have had various, ridiculous questions that are being asked, and it was just crazy. I remember when I was schooling, and I had, quite a number of Nigerians in my class, and there were interactions where someone actually is being asked, "Are you a virgin?" in an interview. And this is just unthinkable. What my experience and the kind of people that I've worked with, I don't phantom anyone asking a question like that. Are you a Muslim? How does you being a Muslim or a Christian affect your ability to perform the job? Are you going to work in a mosque? Or you are being recruited as a priest.
As a priest in the mosque. If you are
recruiting a priest, then you may need to ask whether the person is a Christian or a Muslim. If you are recruiting a Malam, then you might want to ask whether the person is a Christian or a Muslim, just to be sure. However, any other factor that does not have a direct bearing on your ability to perform the job should be excluded as a recruiter. And it's important that you focus on the substance.
So as an interviewee, if I'm asked if I'm a Christian, should I say yes? Should I say, why are you asking me that question? That would be a very deadly thing to say, isn't it?
In most instances, I probably would just say I abstain.
Okay.
Because you cannot be compelled to ask any question.
You abstain from the job as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. That is what it means. But you also need to understand your values, your personal values. And because an organization that is interested in recruiting only Muslim or a Christian for a non-religious organization should tell you the kind of organization it is. And if you are a serious candidate, you should not be looking at working within such a setting.
The serious candidates, the serious candidature also comes with the hunger. You are hungry at home for 3-4 years. You've been looking for a job. It looks like this is the last opportunity perhaps to nail it. And you're asked about some of these unwarranted questions, and you want to know your values. Is that realistic?
That is very realistic, but I'm also not oblivious of the realities of the situation, as you rightly mentioned, when the belly is empty. But don't forget, there is a lot to you than just filling up your belly.
Okay.
You see, someone that disrespects you yet puts food on the table, I wonder even if you eat the food, you will actually be satisfied. And beyond that, you may get into that particular organization, but are you really likely to build a career within that setting and to be a satisfied employee? Now, there is a lot more to work than just getting food to put on your table. Now, a couple of years ago, there was a research that actually indicated that about 25% of employees that were interviewed, the salary that they were actually earning is not enough to cover their expenses to and from work on a daily basis. You see, but a job is a much more important thing than just getting a salary. There are a lot of people that will even work for free just so they can have those social connections. They will have the opportunity to interact with other people, to mingle, to find themselves within it. Because the job that you do sometimes puts you in a particular class. And so there is so much to working for an organization than just getting your paycheck at the end of the month. And of course, if you are hungry, I will in reality say by all means take the job, but look for the nearest exit once the opportunity comes up, because your long-term happiness is the most important thing. But of course, your immediate needs of getting food on your table cannot be overlooked. Where such questions are being posed and that is your only option, you might be tempted to just swallow, your ethical standards, your pride, take the job. But it's not even an advice that I'm giving. Once you find yourself in that particular position, the next thing is that you are looking for your door out. The next opportunity that comes up, you are out, and then the organization has to start the entire recruitment process again. So it's a costly venture, and don't mess it up. Don't increase the cost of recruitment by sitting in there as a panel member and setting out an agenda to terrorize candidates and basically ask questions that violate their personal principles and all that.
Right. Now, let me go to my next question. Do you go into an interview as a recruiter having your plans that, okay, for example, for this job, we need a woman, except that we can't say it. But this job, we need a woman, which means that all men who are coming for the interview are just wasting their time. Does that happen?
Not in my experience. Now, there's been times that I have been very much involved in making sure that I create the right gender balance. And in most instances, it does not just begin with the interview process. Now, there are very capable women out there. And so if you are really looking at balancing the gender disparities within your organization, you need to ensure that you are attracting women to your organization. Once that happens, you will be in a position to have a great pool of female candidates that are capable of excelling in those interviews. Now, the moment you set out that, okay, this particular vacancy, I'm only going to recruit a woman, straight away, you are likely to create problems for your organizations, both in terms of your image and in terms of the actual delivery. Now, it's important that you set yourself a target that I am going to ensure that I'm bringing on board a lot more women, letting them to know about those vacancies and actually applying for those vacancies, and basically increasing the pool of candidates. However, there are others that put in conscious efforts to ensure that some of these roles are typically given to women, and that is not wrong in any way. However, that could put your organization at a bigger risk, because then you are basically compelled to make the decision in one way or the other. Increase your pool, get a lot more women to be aware of your vacancies, let them understand, the value that you are creating for your employees, especially women. And organically, you will attract competent women that will come into those interviews and excel without you necessarily having to say that I am giving this to a woman.
All right. Now, yesterday we were speaking to one Isaac Sessi, who was giving us tips on how to prepare convincing CV. And one of the things he said was that a chunk of the CVs that they would pick and even go ahead to interview are people whom have been recommended by people they trust and know. Now, I am wondering if, so for example, as an interviewee or someone who's seeking for a job seeker, if I come into the interview, there's that could be there. That could be the case that some other people who I am competing with may actually have been recommended. Do I stand any chance of proving to the panel that even though you have a recommended person, I have proven that I know my stuff and I am a better candidate over the recommended person? And let's put maybe some figures. What percentage of the times have this happened, so much so that you plan that, I have a recommendation on say on Emeka Okpara, that if it comes to streaming, he is the best. So the interview is just a process. But then someone else comes in and I realize that this guy is a better candidate than Emeka Okpara. So even though Emeka has been highly recommended, I'm putting him aside and I'm actually going with this guy.
Now, recommendations are very critical within the job search spectrum. And when you attend a fair that talks about job search, they typically will talk about networking as a critical aspect of your job search. If you are going to land the right job, networking is extremely critical. And so far in my career, I have changed roles quite a number. And to be honest with you, all the roles or all the companies I have worked for, I did not directly apply to those companies. All of those, recruitments came from references. Someone will say that, except for my first job, that even that it was a senior, colleague of mine that actually shared the opportunity with me and shared my CV with the organization, and I got a call to come and write an aptitude test and all that. So networking is extremely critical. However, the moment you get invited into an interview process, everyone has an equal chance, because at the end of the day, irrespective of the number of recommendations that people might have given about you, you must be able to demonstrate that to the person that is making the decision. So the fact that you have been recommended does not necessarily mean that you have a free pass to the job. You still need to come and demonstrate. And I have seen that a number of times where people that get recommended, or people who work within an organization and they apply for a job within that organization, they feel they have an entitlement. And at the end of the day, they end up not doing the right preparations. They don't prepare enough like the other people that do not have the recommendations. And they come in and then they fail woefully because of some of the basic things. The moment you get invited for an interview, it means that you meet the basic requirements to deliver on the role. The decision will be made after the other forms of assessments have been concluded. Recommendation is very important because for a recruiter, once again, it's a risk when you are recruiting someone that you do not know. And the employment relationship, we always say, is more like a social contract. It's not like you are signing up to buy some goods. Okay, you have your mobile phone and I am buying, I pay you, I know I'm getting exactly the mobile phone. When you are recruiting someone to perform a job, there is a presumption that the person will deliver. You have a long list of responsibilities for the job. What is the exact proof that what you are recruiting and what you are paying for is exactly what you are getting? And so recommendation is very important because it typically comes from people that have worked with you and they can vouch for you. And as a recruiter, when you see recommendations from certain people from certain industries, then you have some level of assurance. It's just like an audit report. When an audit report is coming from a credible organization, then you know that, okay, at least I can have some level of confidence on this particular company. It's the same thing. When a particular person that is so much respected within an industry recommends you for a job, there is the presumption that you really have what it takes. And in most instances, you may have a slight edge, but you still need to prove it at the assessment stage of the interview. Recommendations alone will not get you the job. Recommendations will get your foot into the room. However, as to whether you will earn a table or a chair on the table, it's a completely different game.
Now, I'll wrap up the conversation. We should be wrapping up now. The question I want to ask, very important question, and this is one of the questions that you're asked at almost every job interview. How much is your expectation, or what is your expectation in terms of salary? And then I'm not too sure if as an interviewee I should mention a big amount of money, and whether when I mention that big amount of money, it would put the interviewer off, or the recruiter off. And that question always, all the time comes up.
Absolutely.
How do we handle that situation if we are asked, how much are you expecting to be paid?
Thanks for that. And this is a question that sometimes I wonder why people really struggle with it. How much do you want to be paid? How difficult is such a question to answer? Now, as simple as it may look, it is actually a difficult question, especially for people that have not done their preparations very well. Now, for most experienced people, they understand the job that they are doing, they understand the requirements of the role, they understand the effort that is required to be successful in that role. They also understand the experiences they are bringing on board and the potential change they can create. And those are things that you can easily marry to determine your value. Because to whom much is given, much is expected. So if a job that is requiring you to do certain things, you must be able to look at that and straight away tell, look, I will not do this job for less than so and so amount. Now, the tricky part is that when you have not done your research properly, you will either oversell or undersell yourself. Now, overpricing yourself is one big problem, because for every single role there typically will be a budget. That budget is not a specific budget. It typically will have a minimum and a maximum. And the recruiter wants to understand exactly where you fit and the kind of offer to make to you that will be acceptable. At the end of the day, if you are offered a salary that you are not happy about, that is going to create a problem between you and your organization right from the onset. Because the moment you walk in there, discussions are typically had, oh, you are not supposed to share your salaries, but there are things that employees typically do. So do your research well, understand the role you are going to perform. And in other jurisdictions, it's so easy. You can, if you are coming to, you are going to interview for a role in Zylofon, you can typically search. If it is a producer job that you are looking for, you can go out there and search what is the range, of salaries for producers. Assuming you are just a newbie, you're coming for the first time. But if you are currently working in a role, you typically know what you earn, and you typically know what it will take to get you out of the organization as far as the monetary consideration is concerned. Because there certainly are several other reasons why you may decide to work for a company, just beyond the money. Of course, in most instances, people pretend like, oh, it's all about the exposure and the experience. But the truth is that 99.9% of the time, the decision to change jobs has something to do with money. And so you should be very firm in terms of what will you give me that will trigger me to actually resign from my current company and join you. So all these things needs to be done. What is the organization? How is their finances like? What are the people that work in there? Do I know anyone that works in there? It will actually help you to make the decision. And in most instances, you don't get into the interview and start thinking about how to answer this question. There are several people out there, they see a job and they will not even apply, because just doing their research, they will have a fair idea the salary on offer. And straight away, they won't even bother, because it is not something that will be acceptable to them. And it's the same for organizations. I recently had a chat with a friend who told me that, he was asked a similar question and he's not too sure exactly what answer to give, and he doesn't want to say something and then they will end up undercutting him.
Right.
Now, when you don't do your research well, you typically will find yourself in a situation like that, where you walk in there and will either mention a ridiculous price so that they will not make you the offer, or you undersell yourself. Now, and I always differentiate between experienced recruiters and other recruiters that are still trying to get their acts right. Now, the fact that somebody has mentioned a lower salary does not mean expectation, does not mean that you should just meet what they expect. If that is the lowest, or probably lower than the range in which you are dealing with. Because at the end of the day, it's a relationship. If I feel significantly unfairly untreated, I will walk into the organization, but I will not be happy and I probably will leave. Now, my advice is that always make sure that you mention a figure. And in my many years of recruitment, especially for mid to high level interviews, I will not allow you to walk out without giving me an idea what your expectations are, because this is very important. As I said, 99% of the time, people will give you various reasons. Hardly do I see people walk into an interview and then they tell you that, okay, it's about the money that I'm making the decision to leave. But in reality, in most instances, research has indicated most of us move for the money, especially at a certain level. Now, there are times that you have finished, satisfying some of your basic needs, and so money being an influence to the job that you take reduces as you make more of it. But Charlie, money is another thing that even the more you make it, is the more that you want to make more. So always do your research and make sure that you have something in mind.
Right. There is a message that says, "Good morning, Noah. Please ask the recruiter about aptitude tests. If a candidate fails an aptitude test similar to that which the civil service conducts, does that mean the candidate cannot get the job?" I think the question is quite straightforward. If you fail an aptitude test, does that kick you out of the job?
It kicks you out of that particular job recruitment. The truth is that there are a lot of candidates that you are dealing with. Aptitude test is one of the screening methods that you actually use.
Right.
And so in most instances, it will not be that when you pass the aptitude test, you have the job. But in order to sift your candidates and make sure that
you prune down the
numbers, you typically will start with a long list.
Okay.
And from the long list, you probably will decide to administer an aptitude test that will help you to reduce the long list into a short list.
Okay.
Then you make your decision based on other recruitment methods. The fact that you fail that test means that you are unlikely to progress as far as that recruitment is concerned, but it does not in any way take anything away from you.
Let me ask you my very final question for the morning. Now, was there a point where you got angry about an interviewee or a job seeker because of the amount they said they were going to take? So, for example, in your mind, you know that for this role, we are paying, let's say, 5,000 Ghana cedis a month. Then the person comes and says, "Oh, for me, I'll take 15,000. Then you ask them, is that the last? They say, "Oh, the last they'll take is 12,000. Does that in any way get you angry and makes the person lose the job?
Not at all. I wouldn't say angry.
Okay.
I just sometimes find it ridiculous and funny. But very often it hardly happens to me, and that will only happen when the initial screening is not proper.